In today's video tutorial, I want to give you 5 tips on how to increase the quality image of your video. You could buy a DSLR and probably set it to auto and get pretty decent video. But you can get even better video when you manually adjust the settings to your DSLR. I'm going to be showing you this on my Canon Rebel T5i. You may not have that camera, but most DSLRs will have all of these settings. So first you'd want to adjust your frame rate. Your frame rate is the amount of video images that your camera captures per second. And you'll want to set your DSLR to 30 frames per second. 30 frames per second means it's capturing 30 video images per second. And that's the best setting that you want for if you're just going to be shooting videos at home, giving tutorials, giving an interview, interviewing another real estate professional. If you would like to change those settings to possibly 60 frames per second, that's a setting that would work best if you're going to be shooting in slow motion, because then it's capturing even more frames per second to allow you to get a smoother video. Alright, so we've got our shot set up. Now let's find our frame rate. So we're going to go to the little Q, and right here where it says recording movie size, we've got different options like 30 frames per second, 24, 60, and 60/40 by 480 in 30 frames. But we want 1920 in 30 frames. Next, you want to adjust your shutter speed. The shutter speed measures the amount of time the shutter is open to allow light to come into the camera. So as a basic rule of thumb, your shutter speed should be double what your frame rate is. If your frame rate is 30 frames per second, your shutter speed is 60. Now we're going to adjust our shutter speed, which is right here. You'll tap on that, and as you can see, it's got different options for shutter speed, and you will just scoot these over. But as I mentioned before, as a rule of thumb, you want your shutter speed to be double what your frame rate is. So we're going to go with 60. The next setting you'll want to adjust is your aperture. So the aperture is the amount of light that will come into your camera. Now that will change depending on the camera lens that you're using. We're using the kit camera lens that came with this Canon, and it goes down to 5.6. Now 5.6 works really well in low light, but you could also adjust your lighting when you have an LED light. Now we're going to set up our aperture. As I mentioned before, the lens that I'm using on the other camera could only go down to 5.6. Now if I select this one, this is a different lens. Now I'm going to want to go down to 4, as it works best with the lowest light. Once you've made those 3 adjustments, you'll want to adjust your ISO. ISO determines how much exposure your image has. If you're overexposed, you're going to get some grainy noise in your image. If you're underexposed, it'll be the same effect, but in lower light. So that's again where a good LED light will come in place. You don't want your ISO to really be more than 800 or so. So you'll see as we adjust the brightness on the LED light, how the ISO changes. So now we want to set our ISO. I have it set to auto. But if I tap on the shutter button, it'll show on the exposure meter right here if I am overexposed or underexposed. As you can see, I am right in the middle, but if I wasn't, I could go into ISO and change it to 100, 200. As you can see, that's bringing the brightness up, but that's also decreasing the quality of your video. So a way to fix that is by having good lighting. So we're going to leave it at 100. The next setting you want to adjust is the white balance. The white balance adjusts the color sensitivity of the camera. So that color will change and the temperature will change if you're shooting outside on a sunny day, on a cloudy day, if you're shooting inside under low light, if you're shooting in a darker room, if you're shooting in a really bright room with fluorescent lighting. White balance will really help show the true color that you're seeing with your eyes through the camera. Now we're going to adjust the white balance. We're going to go into the Q and under this light here, and you'll see white balance. As you can see, there are several settings for white balance. There's auto white balance, there's daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten, fluorescent, flash, and custom. I have it under tungsten because I'm actually using a tungsten light to light this scene right now. But if I brought it to auto white balance, it would bring me a little bit more yellow. So you can adjust this however you see fit depending on where you're shooting that day. Auto white balance works pretty well. I like the way it looks under tungsten right now, so I'm gonna choose that. Your camera is set and ready to go. Now you know how to manually adjust the video settings on your DSLR for better video. If you have any questions, leave a comment below and subscribe to our YouTube channel to continue getting video tutorials for video production at home.